So I'll go ahead and start it now, okay?
The beautiful and majestic Yahara Lakes, Mendota, Monona, Wingra, Waubesa, Kiganza. Natural gems that enrich our lives and make Greater Madison truly special. Regional identity, cultural heritage, recreation, beauty, wildlife. The lakes are ecological marvels, drawing people to their shores for thousands of years. Their value is immeasurable. But there are some things we can measure. Nearly half of the 66 miles of lakeshore and all 193 billion gallons of water are owned by us, the public. Clean Lakes Alliance is proud of its prior work and investments to protect and enhance these assets. But ongoing beach closures and harmful cyanobacteria make clear that more is needed for the lakes to meet their potential. Today, local leaders believe we are at a crossroads where our collective choices have the power to lead us down one of two paths, either to a future where lake stewardship is prioritized, transforming them back into our greatest natural assets, or to a day when our lakes are liabilities of neglect and underinvestment. Now there is new momentum. 19 organizations forged a compact in late 2019 to help us down the path to healthy lakes, seeking to build on past success, leverage new understanding and opportunities, and empower more people to take action. Called Renew the Blue, its agenda is both simple and attainable. Clearer lakes, open beaches, fewer algal blooms. The good news is that change is already happening, and it's making a difference. 30 years of stream monitoring data tell a story of conservation practices working, with in-stream phosphorus and sediment concentrations in decline. If not for increasing rainfall and runoff, such practices would have resulted in an impressive 36% decrease in the amount of phosphorus delivered. With every pound of phosphorus producing up to 500 pounds of algae, our green waters still mirror an upstream landscape that is out of balance, land that holds the key to the lake's eventual recovery. The solutions are known. These goals can be met, and community leaders agree Renew the Blue is the roadmap to get us there. More conservation practices to build soil health, absorb rainfall, and prevent erosion. Less winter manure spreading in high-risk areas. Streets clear of decaying fall leaf debris. And more green infrastructure to create healthier, more resilient landscapes. With all stakeholders playing a role, lake quality can and will improve. On an individual level, as more people take action at their homes and businesses, they become more engaged, helping to sustain and support the larger cleanup effort. The top direct impact actions are to build additional capacity to process, handle, and transport manure, increase farmland acres guided by a nutrient management plan, increase farmland acres under no-till or reduced tillage and continuous living cover, increase fall leaf collections from city streets, protect wetlands and internally drained lands, and increase green infrastructure installations. Clean Lakes Alliance invites you to join the mission to build a better water quality future for this and future generations. One rain garden, one field, and one beach at a time. To renew the blue, to lead by example, to become participants in the solutions, to advocate for needed change. By adopting a new water ethic and through the cumulative impact of many individual actions, open the door to making Greater Madison's lakes among the best in the world.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining me this evening. Thanks to everybody who's tuning in at home. Is the heart pumping, that music? You're all inspired to go home and take action, sort of the cliffhanger at the end. So, by the way, I'm Paul Dearlove. I'm with Clean Lakes Alliance. I work there as the deputy director and their chief science officer. Been there for the last several years. And was really grateful to be invited to by the city of Monona to present the outcomes of a very huge initiative called Renew the Blue, completely focused on the lakes, and it actually is one of the broadest and most diverse coalitions ever assembled, focused directly on the Yahara Lakes ever. So we're really excited about it. We're really excited for its potential. And I'm here to basically introduce you to what that plan shows, what it means for the future of the lakes. And I threw up on the slide right now the vision for Clean Lakes Alliance, because I think that's important, and it'll kind of explain a little bit why we decided to convene this expanded partnership. We really do see a future where the lakes are viewed and treated as the center of the community. And we'll know when that happens. That happens when the lakes are cleaner. And we obviously have a ways to go. This is a view of the lakes actually from I call it the bottom of the funnel. So the watershed, or the land area that drains to our 5 lakes, is quite extensive. It's about 400 square miles. And we're looking sort of a bird's eye view above Lake Kaganza, looking north or up the funnel towards Lake Mendota in the background there. And I like to show this picture, one, because it gives us a perspective that we're not usually used to. You know, when you think of the postcard perspective, it's oftentimes of the capital, right? Either viewing from Monona or Mendota, or and oftentimes it's the Monona Terrace Convention Center right there. But the lakes are a lot bigger than just Lake Monona and Lake Mendota. It's a 5 lake system. It's all interconnected. And it has a very rich history. And now I'm talking about going back 13,000 years. So when the glaciers retreated from this area, left behind these lakes, and there's evidence of human occupation, habitation in this area going back that many years. We're sitting on the ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk. That's the Native American presence here for much of time until present day. And that evidence is oftentimes not really clearly evident, but it's represented by probably the largest concentration of effigy mounds anywhere in the world, definitely within North America, are located along this chain of lakes. And it really speaks to the reverence that those earlier communities had of water and the just the fact that these lakes were teeming with wildlife, and they can harvest those resources and live in this area. And they called it Teejop. That's what that word is at the top. It's the Ho-Chunk spelling of Teejop, meaning the Four Lakes region. And interestingly enough, when fast forwarding in time, when we got to European settlement of the area, the earlier settlers sort of moved from south to north, mapping out the landscape. And so the first lake they reached was Kaganza, and they, in all their creative ways, decided to name that lake First Lake. And then as they continued moving north, they just, named each lake accordingly. So the lakes for a while were named First through Fourth Lakes, with Lake Mendota being Fourth Lake. And it wasn't until some of the earlier land developers, settlers who were trying to make a profit off of the land, decided that it would be a lot more marketable to sell off those parcels if the lakes had more romantic names. And so they attempted to name the lakes in a way that sort of was reminiscent of Ho-Chunk language, but not really. They sort of made up those names. So that's how we got the names today. Whoops. So the lakes, obviously, I don't need to tell anybody this. They're important in many ways. They really put us on the map. If you think about Greater Madison and all our communities that surround these lakes, I'm not sure if this would be considered a premier destination without the water-rich aspects of the area. You look at a map, you know exactly where we are. There's a lot of what a lot of people call flyover country in the Midwest, and I would argue that this is not one of those flyover areas. This is a true destination. We have obviously a lot of economic activity that's generated around the lakes, everything from property value to tourism to like huge events like the Ironman, that CrossFit come here. Lots of dollars spent because of these resources. We have the Memorial Union Terrace, and I work with a 50-member community board for Clean Lakes Alliance, and I'll tell you that many of the business representation on that board will be the first to say that, yeah, we bring our new recruits or people that are potentially thinking about relocating to this area and taking a job with our company. We take them to the Memorial Union or other places on the lakes to show them what they would basically have access to. So it's an enormous recruiting tool. It's also the most studied lake system on the planet. Limnology, the field of limnology. I'm a limnologist, so that's my training at the UW-Madison. Limnology is a study of freshwater systems, lakes. And limnology was born at the UW-Madison as a field of study. So research has been ongoing, going way back. And Lake Mendota in particular is considered the most studied lake in the world. We know they're also threatened. One of the things as an organization that we worry about is that there will be a time potentially, if we're not careful and we don't get our act together, that there will be a time when our identity is associated with a negative aspect of the lakes, and that the lakes actually become a liability for this area and not a resource. If I say Flint, Michigan, you have an image of something, right? If I say Toledo, Ohio, you might think about their water systems having to be shut down because of massive blue-green algal blooms in Lake Erie where they get their drinking water. And when I mentioned Flint, Michigan, it's lead in the water. Or If you think of the Cuyahoga River, what one of the motivating factors to the Clean Water Act. You think of rivers on fire. These are not things that we want to have associated with our area, right? And even this cartoon, which I like showing, 2017, Phil Hands with Wisconsin State Journal did this one, and it sort of speaks volumes to how the lakes can be perceived. And if we're not careful, people are going to stop going to the lakes. They're going to feel that they're unsafe. People will not go to places like the Union or visit our beaches. And this is just a list that I'm showing right now of what I call troubled waters, and it's all the lakes, streams, and beaches just in our watershed that are federally designated as impaired. And when I say impaired, I mean that they are not meeting what is considered their designated uses, and they're not meeting minimal water quality standards. That's a problem, right? So that's essentially all the lakes, just about every, with a few exceptions, almost every stream that feeds water to the lakes, and the lion's share of the major beaches are affected in some way. So the lakes and streams are mostly impaired because of phosphorus, but there are other issues. And the beaches are because of E. coli bacteria. So why is this the case? Well, when I speak about a watershed, you can think of, and I mentioned this funnel concept, is the lakes are like regional collection basins. They're like holding tanks in a way. And everything that is on the landscape gets washed into the lakes or enters the water eventually in some manner. So, as water moves off the landscape into the lakes, either as water filtering into the ground and going into groundwater and groundwater coming into the lakes, or as surface runoff into the lakes, it has a time period. Based on the volume of the lakes and how much they flush water through those basins, there's a real kind of like response factor associated with that. So if we start to make changes in the watershed, there will be a lag time before you usually see the response of those actions in the watershed. And I think unfortunately, what a lot of people think is that lag time is so significant that it's like they lose hope. People lose hope because they think, well, even if we change today, that's decades and decades in the future before we'd see any response. And that's actually not the case. So, Lake Mendota is a 4.5-year residence time, meaning like a molecule of water enters Lake Mendota from the inlet. This is very basic and conceptual, but it would take 4.5 years basically for that molecule to leave Mendota and have new molecules coming in. So it takes 4.5 years for the lake to completely replace its volume of water. That's not that long. And we've also found that it's even shorter than that in terms of response. So when we get a drought year, for instance, and we have a little runoff that's moving material off the landscape into the lakes, if we have a drought, the water quality immediately improves, and it can stay that way into subsequent years until the next big runoff events. So this is a good sign, and it's a sign that we can recover the water quality in these systems. All watersheds are connected. So when I talk about the Yahara River watershed or the Yahara Lakes watershed, that watershed is nested in larger watersheds. Those are nested in even larger watersheds. So all watersheds kind of feed into each other. What I'm showing on the screen right now is the Mississippi River watershed. So as water flows through the Yahara Lakes, the Yahara River is the connecting river of those lakes. The Yahara River then empties into the Rock River. The Rock River gets into the Mississippi River. And then Mississippi River drains into the Gulf of Mexico. And if you've heard of the Gulf of Mexico dead zone, that is another response of landscapes out of balance, too much pollution and contaminants getting into the water. That is all getting flushed eventually down into the Gulf of Mexico. So we have a dead zone that is unable to support life that varies between a few thousand to several thousand square miles of area that is affected. These are examples of clear signs of a landscape out of balance, and what Renew the Blue, which I'm going to be talking about in depth in a little bit, is trying to get at, is trying to put landscapes back into balance and using us as stakeholders and to take on actions at our own homes, places of business, et cetera, to bring these landscapes back into balance. But telltale signs is if you see soil exposed, if you see soil moving, like in that picture of that crop field, that is nature out of balance. If you see lots of standing water where it normally shouldn't be, that is a sign that the water is not able to complete its hydrologic cycle. It's not able to absorb into the ground. That's a problem. Now, granted, if you have huge rainstorms, you're going to see some flooding. But we are seeing more and more flooding, even on smaller rainstorms, because we just have so much armoring of the landscape that the water cannot get absorbed into the soil. And then another obvious sign of a landscape out of balance is in that lower picture where you see a storm sewer outfall discharging a plume of sediment. And this was a picture taken from our office. We have an office that we have donated space in the Variks Plaza building right next to James Madison Park. And this is looking out one of the windows over James Madison Park. This is in the summer. We had just one of those kind of like quick downpours, sunny, downpour, and then sunny again. And this was all happened within like 20 minutes. The rain came through, and you started to see this. We ended up tracing it back. There was one construction site up towards the Capitol that one of the construction site's erosion control measures was improperly installed, or it had failed, and that's just one small construction site uphill. That's what that can do. So even little changes can make a difference, both positive and negatively. What's exciting is when I mentioned about this broad coalition coming together, is it's not the first time that this coalition came together, and we call it the Yahara Clean Compact. CLEAN is an acronym for Capitol Lakes Environmental Assessment and Needs, which is a very long and complicated name. So and folks love acronyms, so they shortened it to CLEAN. And what this is it's a partnership. The partnership began back in actually 2008, and it only represented government. It was the state government, county government, and city government coming together and saying, okay, what can we do as governmental entities to solve these problems? Our lakes have had problems going back, decades and decades and decades, right? Back to the time when sewage was being sent untreated into Lake Monona. I mean, that goes way back. The problems have shifted as we solve one problem, another problem surfaces or we create ourselves that we need to address. So this compact is a partnership that has grown since 2008. Clean Lakes Alliance reconvened the original governmental partners and then expanded the partnership to include these other entities. And in the end, it was a 2.5-year planning endeavor involving scientists, involving government officials, nonprofit leadership, the university. And what's unique about this effort it's the only time that I know of, at least in this area, and I'm not sure of any other example elsewhere even, where two State Department secretaries, the chancellor of the university system, Mayor of Madison, Mayor of Middleton, groups like non-traditional groups like the Builders Association, the Realtors Association, all came together, did the planning, agreed to the recommendations, and signed off on it. So we have the executives of all these groups signing off on these action steps, saying yes, we endorse this. That's not typical. And it's also something we should remember, because we can hold this up and say, look, we all signed on to this. And the compact is just is one set group of entities. This will grow. There are many other communities in the watershed, many other groups, many other nonprofits, et cetera, that would sign on to this compact. And that's what Clean Lakes Alliance is going to be doing next, is getting additional groups to sign on to the work. The goals are simple: open beaches, fewer algal blooms, clean water. And the thing that made it the process to me special and inspiring was that it was easy to come to agreement, and you wouldn't think it would be easy to come to agreement, because everybody has their different agendas, everybody has their different opinions on things. But one of our members spoke, I think, to what it was on everybody's mind when at one of our earliest meetings said, "Isn't it really simple? Isn't it just that we want the lakes to be safe to swim in?" And yeah, everybody was like nodding their heads and like, okay, well, let's get to work. We can have differences of opinions on how we develop on the landscape, or what we do, or what, where most of the action should happen, or where most of the funding should go. But really, we have a shared set of values. We can agree on those values, and we have an outcome that we can drive towards. We identified 5 stakeholder groups, and I challenge you to look at those 5 stakeholder groups and not be able to find yourself in one of those groups. And I don't care what group I'm presenting to, I would say the same thing. You should be able to find yourself in this group, and oftentimes you could in one of these groups, and oftentimes you can find yourself in multiple groups. We are all stakeholders in this watershed. That's what I'm trying to get at. That means we all have a role to play, and we all have impacts on the lake. They could be small, relatively speaking, but cumulatively they add up, and we should all be taking responsibility for the stewardship of the number one resource, in my opinion, in Clean Lakes Alliance's opinion, in the greater Madison area. These are the 3 objectives of Renew the Blue. We decided that we still needed to focus on phosphorus. Phosphorus has been the long-standing pollutant of concern for our lakes. It doesn't mean that there are not other contaminants or stressors affecting water quality. There are many. But phosphorus is one of those that really probably has the greatest share of impacts associated with it. It's also probably one of the things that's largely in our control. So phosphorus is contained in soil, it's contained in organic material, fertilizers, etc. It's a natural element, but we have too much of it that is entering into the waterways. It's a limiting nutrient, so it limits the growth of algae. That picture that you see in that upper left-hand corner is a study that was done back in the early 80s in Canada, where different nutrients and ingredients that are needed for aquatic life were introduced into these 2 paired basins at different ratios, and it was quickly determined that it was the phosphorus was that key ingredient that really turned those lakes green, and really turned them green like a light switch. Also, E. coli, because it's an indicator of pathogenic presence, something that's going to make you sick, E. coli is also one of the objectives of Renew the Blue, because that's the other aspect that closes our beaches. Phosphorus, which drives cyanobacteria bloom, a photosynthesizing bacteria that can produce toxins, can close our beaches. E. coli can close our beaches. And then runoff. Runoff is something that prior planning did not focus on. Prior Yahara Clean Compact planning did not focus as much on, but because it is the primary mechanism that delivers phosphorus and E. coli to the lakes, phosphorus has to be, or runoff has to be part of that solution. Our lakes are, as I mentioned earlier, are very responsive. So this is just a really sort of crude representation of phosphorus and lake clarity. As phosphorus declines, lake clarity increases. It's not a linear relationship, so it's not like, turning a dial, and each turn of the dial, downward of phosphorus, you're going to get that much increase in lake clarity. What I want to show, though, is that we're probably up kind of closer on the upper part of that graph for phosphorus, meaning that we haven't gotten to that sort of threshold where you really start to see big changes, but we can get there. If we do get there, and I'm going to talk about that target level that we're trying to reach, we can double the number of summer days that the lakes are algae-free and clear and basically free of algal blooms. I like this picture because it's really telling, isn't it? You can see, if you can see those colors, I mean, it's a deep green in what would be Monona Bay, and a more hopeful blue in the other parts of the lake. And I think this is a good representation of like the paths that we could take, right? We could go towards a future that we see that green water more and more, or we can go towards a future where we see clear water like that. Renew the Blue did identify, or I should say, did confirm that the target level of phosphorus that we can accept as in entering the lakes and still maintain good water quality should stay the same. That has not changed. That is something that was figured out 12 years ago, and it's still the same target. 12 years ago, we had a 50% decrease that we had to achieve in order to reach that target. Unfortunately, it's now 57% decrease to reach that target. It is not because of a failure in identifying or completing the necessary work. And I'm going to show that to you in a little bit. What it is indicative of is greater volumes and intensity of water falling across the landscape. So we have more water pushing that material into the lakes. It's a function of climate change. We're experiencing it. And that is the reason why we have a larger gap to close than we did 12 years ago. So I'm going to actually skip over that for a second in the interest of time. I want to speak about the elephants in the room, as I like to call them. There are two main sources of phosphorus pollution that we are laser focused on through Renew the Blue. And the biggest one is that I don't think it's any mystery to anybody in our area. We have a major dairy industry in our watershed. We have farms in our watershed, and it's a double-edged sword. Our farmers are our best conservationists. We are here and enjoy this area because of our farmland, because of those pastoral landscapes, because it's not all urbanized. We have great conservation farming happening that is great for our lakes, but we also have probably an overcapacity of there is an overcapacity of livestock in our watershed. So we have about 60,000 or so cows residing in the upper reaches or north of Lake Mendota and the headwaters of the watershed. That's an equivalent of almost 2.5 million people. That amount of waste is about equivalent of about 2.5 million people living in that part of the watershed. That's like Houston, Texas, where that waste is mostly untreated. So some of that waste is treated. We have a couple manure digesters. There's some on-site treatment of manure, but most of it is spread on the landscape, and that is normally an okay thing. That's normally a good thing because manure can be a resource. It's fertilizer, natural, for crops. Crops love it. They'll grow well, but when you have too much of it, obviously that's a bad thing. Positive news is the county just passed its budget, and in that budget there are some very lake-friendly budget items, and one of them is to develop significantly increased manure processing capacity in our watershed. Currently we treat about manure from about 10,000 cows. The county is attempting to develop the capacity to process manure from another additional 30,000 cows, taking care of about 2/3 of the livestock in the watershed. So that's a huge sign. The other elephant in the room is leaves in the street. So City of Monona, right? Now we're talking your language. You're in an urban area. Our homes and businesses and the landscape in general has been engineered over the last century and a half to move water as quickly and efficiently as possible into the lakes. We have a storm sewer network that delivers that water through pipes untreated into the lakes. So those leaves are organic material. They land in the streets. If they're allowed to sit there and decay, that those leaves release phosphorus, and that's a very potent pulse of phosphorus that gets in the lakes each fall. So that's something that I know City of Monona works hard at to keep leaf debris out of the streets through leaf vacuuming and other partnerships with homeowners to try to get that leaf material out of the street before it can release that phosphorus. You saw in that video that there would have been, if it wasn't for all this additional rain that we're getting, a 36% decrease in phosphorus. We call it loading into the lakes, so amount of phosphorus, mass of phosphorus reaching the lakes. If you through modeling, if we know what practices are out there working. We have stream gauges in the streams that feed water into the lakes, and they're monitored very closely. We could track over a 30-year period of time, going back 30 years, how much phosphorus is entering the lakes through those streams, and we can eliminate the variability of climate and stream flow and precipitation. And if we were to do that, all these practices that we have been investing in, have been adopting across the watershed, would have solved our problem, or pretty darn close to it. So, in other words, what I'm trying to say is, don't lose hope again. Okay? We are making a difference, and it's also shown in this graph. This is the concentration of phosphorus in our streams that in the streams that feed water into Lake Mendota. And Lake Mendota is a kind of a bellwether for the other lakes. It sits at the top of the chain, has major effects on the downstream lakes. Most phosphorus from the downstream lakes gets that phosphorus from the outlet of the lake above it. So these different streams, you can see that variability, high variability, moves all over the place, right? And that dotted line shows that's the standard. We want phosphorus concentrations to be at that dotted line or lower. And you can see going back from present to going back to 2013 and even before that, it's well above that line. But look where it's trending, and look how the variability is decreasing. So it's not only getting, the concentrations are lowering, but they're also have less variability on those lower ranges. That's a great sign. This graph shows you what's happening sort of big picture. So if you think of like the water, think of the watershed as like a mug of filled with, I don't know, water. Okay, it's just a giant mug. You can fill that mug with water, and you can pour water out, right? And then you have some water that might stay in there. If you think about now, replace that water with phosphorus. The watershed, like a mug, is accepting phosphorus, it's storing phosphorus, and it's exporting phosphorus. So phosphorus enters as like, if we bring in food contains phosphorus. We're eating it, we dispose of it, it goes through our waste system. We might import fertilizers, we might import feed for cattle, for cows. These are all imports of phosphorus. That phosphorus then is either stored in the soil, it's stored in the lake bed, it's stored in the lake itself, and it leaves by either the outlet of the lake, out of the watershed, or it can leave through marketable products. So like farmers harvest their crops, they export those out of the watershed. That's phosphorus leaving the watershed. So this shows research completed by Eric Booth from UW-Madison. He was also on our science team for Renew the Blue, among many other scientists. And it shows a favorable trend. So we want to get to that dotted line again, right at the zero mark, or below that, which would be a net a balance, a mass balance, zero balance, or a negative balance for phosphorus, meaning we're exporting more than we're importing of phosphorus. And you can see when changes were made to feed supplements for cattle, phosphorus was taken out of those feed supplements, meaning the cattle or the cows were producing manure that was lower in phosphorus, or ag fertilizers, commercial fertilizers brought in were reduced. We saw significant declines in the net phosphorus stored in the watershed. And then again, when the digesters came online, we have two manure digesters working. They produce marketable products like compost that then get exported out of the watershed. So we are trending towards a zero balance, which is fantastic news. Renew the Blue also tries to move us toward a situation where we have a living root in the soil all the time. We're trying to green the watershed, right, or regreen the watershed. Plants, especially native plants, but perennial crops, other types of plants, if they're always growing in the soil becomes healthier. You have healthier soils, more porous soils. You have better water infiltration. You have many other co-benefits that are associated with those plants. They're feeding pollinators. They're beautifying yards. They're beautifying fields and so forth. So that's one of the major goals and recommendations of Renew the Blue is maintain a living root in the soil. Every yard counts, and this can apply to every farm field counts, every shoreline counts. We all have the ability to take action. If you're a homeowner, you may have a street terrace that you can work with your local municipality to maybe put in a rain garden in that terrace to capture water. You can put one on your property. You can get out there and rake the leaves out of your street gutter. There's many things that can be done. Attach a rain barrel to your roof. I recommend this author, Doug Tallamy, if you're really interested in getting into native gardening. That's one of my interests, my personal interests. It's something that can help the lakes as well as pollinators. Doug Tallamy has some great books that I've enjoyed. I've also seen some of his webinars, and it really sort of inspires me. I'm sure others can come up with other people, but I'm a big fan of Mr. Tallamy's. I'm going to just race through this really quick. I want to let people know also about how does Clean Lakes Alliance fit into the Renew the Blue effort. We fit into the effort by essentially mobilizing and empowering people to take action. That's why we convened the compact to begin with. That's why we felt that the roadmap to cleaner lakes needed to be updated, more partners brought into the picture, and kind of like really doing a reboot on the whole effort. We try to get people interested through and aware through citizen monitoring with water quality. We do science cafes. On the desk over there, as you leave, we have some of our literature that I encourage you to take, one of them being the Greater Madison Lake Guide, which we include a State of the Lakes report in every year, so you can see how progress is trending, how water quality is trending in the lakes, and what we think is the contributors to those changes. And this is something to put on your calendar. It's winter now. The snow is flying. We're going to start to look at the lake and wait for it to freeze. We have our Mendota Freeze Contest that just opened for a $1,000 gift certificate from Land's End if you're a winner. So go to our website or look for our emails and other promotion around the Mendota Freeze Contest. And then the 5K race or walk on Lake Mendota starting from the Edgewater is a fantastic opportunity to get connected to the lakes and know that they can be enjoyed in the wintertime too. And so this is part of a larger festival, a whole week of activities. So I encourage people to visit us for this free family festival. The 5K is by registration. There's a fee associated with that, but the festival itself is all free. And then we try to increase volunteerism. So there's a lot of opportunities in the watershed to roll up your sleeves, get involved. A lot of great groups out there that do good work. One of our focus areas is to really get businesses out and matching them with the needs in the community. So if, say, like City of Monona Parks needs a big team of volunteers to do some clearing of buckthorn in a critical shoreline area or natural area, we would be interested in partnering with a City of Monona Parks or City of Middleton or whoever it is, and mobilize those volunteers and put together a volunteer action day in concert with the host site partner or that municipality or that group. So a lot of great work can be done that way. I am not going to go over all the different recommendations. I believe I covered most of these in the presentation. I see I'm running a little short on time. I'll put those up there just so that you can kind of be reminded of some of the top actions in Renew the Blue. One of the things that was interesting that we learned was that more of the watershed than was originally anticipated actually drains into depressions. So about 4 out of every 10 acres in the watershed drains to a closed basin or a depression. It's difficult for that water to reach the lakes, which opens up another opportunity, right? We can focus resources, we can focus attention on the high runoff areas, the areas that are very hydrologically connected to the lakes. That's where we can make the biggest difference. If we're focusing attention in areas that never really drain to the lake because they've drained into these closed depressions, then we're really not targeting resources effectively. So just wanted to mention that. And then I'll throw up our website, the video that I showed earlier. You can get that from our website. A lot of great information. You can download a copy of Renew the Blue. It's a big document. It's got many action recommendations for each of these different stakeholder groups. Find yourself in those actions. Look at them. There's resources available through our website on how to implement certain practices that are recommended. And then reach out to us by email through our general email address up there as well. And I'm available to answer any questions or if there's anything you want to talk about, and as well as things beyond Renew the Blue, which is largely a phosphorus reduction effort. If you have questions about the biology of the lakes, ecology of the lakes, history, whatever it might be, I invite those questions. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Paul, I love that you started by, oh, jeez. I haven't practiced what I was about to say. I just love that you started by reminding everyone in the room and at home listening that, you know, ancient civilizations throughout as far back as we can remember, you know, you look for the water, and that's where you live. You live by the water. That's the whole point. It's life. It's life-giving, and that hasn't changed. We still need water. And I first took out my pen and started writing down some notes when you mentioned that the 5 lakes chain that we live right next, it's right in our backyard. We are so blessed with it. It has, did you say, if I heard correctly, it has one of the highest concentrations of F&G mounds
in North America, yeah,
in the
potentially
country.
the world, but I mean, it's definitely in North
world.
America. It's
That's
yeah,
incredible.
It's one of the largest.
Absolutely incredible. And the second thing that I jotted down was when the slide came by, excuse me, talking about the elephants in the room. And you talked about that there's just a lot of cows upstream at the top of the filter. And then for the folks living in town, it's the leaves in our streets. I mean, that's what we can do here in Monona more than anything else. Can you give me, sometimes I wonder as I'm raking the leaves out of my street, or I'm putting up a yard sign, or I'm leaving a flyer behind, or I'm trying to coordinate something that the city can do, I just kind of wonder to myself, like, how big of a deal really is this, getting my leaves out of the street? The fact that it was one of the 2 cows in the room really gives me hope that we are focusing on the right thing. But would you speak a little bit more about, like, really, as an average Joe citizen, how much benefit really can I, you know, bring just by getting my leaves out of the street?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, part of the answer won't be something that you want to hear, and that's that. You know, it's just like, you know, I mean, just imagine just like one small farmer who might just have a few cows, removes those few cows. Is that going to make a big difference? Well, probably not. Probably be negligible. You couldn't really even tell. Same thing with, you know, our urban residents taking actions. You know, a lot of, like, I live on the near west side of Madison. My property is very small. I have a very small curb frontage. When I rake the leaves out of the curb, do I feel like I'm going to start seeing fewer algal blooms or less intense algal blooms? No, but I feel I feel good because I feel like I'm part of a bigger picture, and I feel like while my action might be meaningless in the scheme of things, it's not meaningless when it comes to leading by example, by joining your neighbors who are also doing it. And when you think of yourself as part of a bigger whole, then I think it becomes something that you can kind of really get excited about and inspired about. And the message is getting out there. You know, City of Monona does a great job of getting the word out. I know municipalities all around are doing that. People now, it's like they understand it. Just like people, you know, maybe 20 years ago, you start talking about phosphorus and like, well, I don't know even what that like connection is. And today it's like pretty common knowledge in many, you know, in many instances. I think getting leaves out of the street is becoming that way. It's going to be like, well, when you see trash, you put it in the garbage. You know, when you have hopefully, you know, when you have a can, you put it in the recycling bin. When you have leaves in your street gutter, you remove them. And I think if that culture really establishes itself, then the cumulative impacts are going to be pretty tremendous. Because you run the numbers and you run participation numbers in different cities, and what happens if you have like just, you know, like 50% of residents doing it, or 60%. You start playing with those numbers, and it's a large amount of phosphorus that we're talking about on an annual basis that can be prevented from getting to the lakes. So yes and no. No, you're not making your individual action is probably not amounting to something, but it is making a positive difference in terms of leadership, in terms of setting a good example of stewardship, and being a part of something bigger. So, yeah, it's a great question. Yeah. Right. Well, one of our problems with lake rehabilitation, especially in this area, is the belief that there's a silver bullet out there, and I think we've sort of lurched back and forth over time, trying to grasp at silver bullets. It never is just one thing. Diverting sewage helped for a while, and then it became non-point source pollution and runoff. Construction site erosion control used to be a big issue. It's not as big of an issue anymore because we identified it as a problem. There are now rules associated with it. There are now practices that are put into place on construction sites, and now it's not as big of a problem. So the problem has shifted, and we've sort of and it doesn't mean just one problem replaces another. It just means it's like sometimes things change. Herd sizes have grown. Milk production has gone through the roof. That means more manure is getting generated. So it's great to see now that tools are being developed to again turn that manure into a resource that could be valuable for our region versus a liability. So yeah, it's going to be ongoing. There's going to be other challenges that we'll face down the road, but we've always felt that the lakes had such incredible value, and that we generally haven't turned our backs on them, and we seem to be going in a direction where we're focusing more on responsibility and stewardship and what needs to happen, which is a hopeful sign for me, at least.
So, Paul, you mentioned, we were talking at the beginning before the presentation started about a noticeable drop in in-person participation in different events, whether it's a presentation or otherwise. And I'm wondering if there's a way that Clean Lakes Alliance is strategizing to re-engage people, not just in volunteering, but honestly getting them out to the lakes, getting them to enjoy the lakes in whatever capacity, whether it's for, natural resource like, fishing or otherwise, or for sport and fun, for swimming. Is there a strategy moving forward to get residents back out of their homes, back out into the wild, and doing stuff again? Because I feel like that's been a major issue. You would have thought that it would have been like this massive influx, and COVID ended, so to speak, and everybody was just got out and been crazy. They would have wanted to do everything outside. And in fact, I think there were more people outside in the height of the pandemic, and then all of a sudden people are still crawling back into their caves. So is there a way to get them, powered up and out and doing stuff again?
Well, I'll tell you what I've seen work well, at least for us. One of the things that we do as an organization is we try to make things fun. We try to connect people to the water first, kind of develop experiences, because people will care if they, like I got into water quality issues going back to my childhood because I was exposed, in my case through privilege. I had a family that owned a cottage, so I was able to go to a cottage and be on a lake and really be exposed to those types of activities that you get from being on a lake, fishing and just sort of mucking around and on the shoreline, exploring, discovering. and that's the first step into to caring. And so what we found to be really successful is just again making it fun. We put together events that oftentimes aren't strictly educational. Like I mentioned the festival earlier. We do a bike ride on the lakes. So it's getting people to start learning about, I can on a weekend I can go bike around the lake and I can visit these different parks, and oh my gosh, these parks are wonderful, because we showcase the parks along the route. Or if it's frozen assets, it's getting exposed to things that you can do on the ice. When people think, wow, well it's that the lakes are dead. Well, no, they're our biggest parks. Like all of a sudden you can access the lakes and ice fish and snowshoe and ice skate and do all these different things. Oh, isn't that great? So anyway, we found that works. Also we found it pretty successful to when we get businesses involved in our volunteer days. Businesses all like to do team building exercises. They like to get their employees involved in things outside of work, to give back to the community, to build stronger relationships among team members. So getting them outside in a beautiful area, a beautiful park, for instance, rolling up their sleeves, doing some work, getting a little bit of education out of it as well, can help inspire steps or actions that get taken back home too. So they'll learn about things, they'll have hands-on experience, like collecting seeds in a prairie or planting something on a shoreline, and then you start to learn about the plants, and then you start to learn I don't have to necessarily have to go to a park to enjoy seeing wildlife or see this beauty. I can bring it home. I can do these things at home. I can build a rain garden. I can build a little pollinator patch of native plants. These are things that I can do pretty easily. So experiences, I guess, is the long answer is what I said, and the short answer is building those experiences.
Speaking of that, so you had talked about there's a little lag in engaging policy that makes changes in practice, that makes changes in quality. And for sustainability purposes moving forward, are you is Clean Lakes Alliance engaging with the next generation, engaging with schools and elementary and high schools to create new volunteers moving forward? Just like you had mentioned, you grew up on a lake, you were inspired by that. There's a lot of people that go to these elementary schools in the Metroplex, in this Madison region, that have never or aren't privileged to get to the lakes. Even things like swimming lessons, promoting swimming lessons and stuff like that, promoting fishing, canoeing, kayaking, getting kids to do these things that otherwise they may never even get the opportunity to do. Is that something that you have a strategy to move forward with?
Yeah, you raise a great point, because you're right on. I mean, kids are oftentimes our best advocates too. If they have say a school field trip experience, and they come back from that outdoor, say it's an outdoor immersion camp of some kind, or a school field trip, and they come back from that field trip and they're excited about what they've learned, what they've seen. What do? They usually go back and they tell their parents, right? And they get their parents see them all excited, and kids can be a great vehicle for maybe persuading the older generations or the adults, those to change their perspectives or rethink their perspectives. So we do agree that creating those generational changes is going to be important. I'll tell you a couple things, and I know Caitlin has something to add too. One is we try to find good partners who are in the educational space, youth educational space. So we are not youth educators at Clean Lakes Alliance, or not currently, as part of our staff. So we try to find good partners who are doing good work, and especially with kids that might be underrepresented. Maybe they're from a community of color, maybe they're from a lower income community that might not have the privileges of access that other communities may have. So we'll try to fund different projects, activities, learning experiences that way. We used to have a camp that we partnered with Boys and Girls Club and Madison Boats to get kids out on the water, kind of connect them to the resource. Caitlin, did you have other thoughts?
Well, we recently hosted the entire 4th grade Winnequa class. Clean Lakes Alliance partnered with the Friends of San Damiano recently and hosted the entire 4th grade Winnequa class out at San Damiano, along with a couple other partners that we had there. So we had the whole 4th grade class come out and do some turbidity testing right on the shore there. They learned about some Ho-Chunk history. They also learned more about the actual house at San Damiano and how that property came to be, and then also about the master planning process kind of and the idea of turning it into a park. And so it's just one small example of the ways that Clean Lake Alliance really relies and really shines when it comes to partnerships, and relying on other entities to really work together. And those entities, like Paul is saying, that we partner with and support other environmental educators and people in the community, that's really like their bread and butter and like the foundation of what they do, and how we can support them getting that message out there too. Yeah.
So to that point, one thing that came to my mind was just like, if the city of Monona, or let's say the Sustainability Committee in the city of Monona, wanted to, we've talked about getting folks out on the lake and just letting them see the city from the water, and perhaps doing a tour of the parks. Just I think a lot of Monona residents don't maybe even realize how much water access they have here in this beautiful community. And for those that might be listening from other communities, am I hearing you say that Clean Lakes Alliance can help communities coordinate these sorts of events, or perhaps give us some ideas or resources that we can draw upon? Is that kind of what we can go to as a resource?
We certainly, yeah.
Kind of.
We can. We're a small staff, so we have 10 people that are staffing in the organization, but we are an alliance. So our strength comes through our volunteers, it comes through our supporters, it comes through our many partners in the watershed. So one of the best things we can do is elevate the impact of what partners are doing. So almost kind of serve as a resource, like you're saying, or umbrella organization that can connect also partners to each other. So yeah, definitely reach out to us. Like if we always love bouncing ideas around, knowing what other groups are doing. So you said the Sustainability Committee. We would love to come to a Sustainability Committee meeting. Learn more about what you're doing, and then you can hear about what we're doing, and maybe there's some some partnership opportunities that we can identify, whether it's us helping you connect to funders or funding for a certain project. Maybe we would fund it directly, or maybe it's helping to mobilize volunteers for a bigger effort. Or even just promoting, using our communication channels to help, just make people aware that something's going on.
Yeah, I did write that down because the committee here in town, one of our community outreach projects is centered around the autumn leave, management and getting people to get their leaves out of the street. And my wheels were turning like, I gotta get you guys to come in and give us some tips on how we can do that.
Please reach
better.
out to us, Teresa. Yeah, we would enjoy working with you.
Do you have time for another question? I am just another thing I wrote down, just out of curiosity, again, back to the whole, like, the two elephants that were in the room and, the management of all these, wonderful cows that we have in the dairy state. And there was a chart that talked about this incredible drop between 1997 and 2007, how there's just like the phosphorus in the water just plummeted, and there was attributed to changes in cattle feed and the fertilizer that's used. So are you saying that the food that cows would eat used to contain more phosphorus than
Right.
it does today? Any idea what the nutritional value to a cow is?
I am
Why
not-
would
I-
phosphorus be put into the food in the first place?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
not be the right person to get
Okay,
into
yeah,
that.
that
I
was
would-
just crazy to me. Yeah.
Caitlin, do you by any chance know from your prior work?
Possibly like the actual, the makeup of
Yeah,
whether it's corn-based.
yeah, that's true.
Right.
That's true.
But
Okay,
also like the fertilizers probably.
that's a big, yeah,
Because they're combined in this graph here.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, definitely fertilizers and their ratios that we looked at.
It's funny how there's that interplay of things happening too, because you see like that big decline, right? That was all of a sudden research had shown that for cow development and health and milk production and stuff, you didn't need as much phosphorus, and so it was starting to get removed because it's expensive and then commercial fertilizers. I don't know why. I'd have to talk to Eric Booth, who did the research, why those declined so precipitously, importing of commercial fertilizers, but they did during that period, and you see the big decline, and then it moderated. Like, you wonder, like, well, why didn't it? And one of the reasons is because, as I alluded to earlier, is milk production has dramatically increased. Like, so yes, herd sizes have gotten bigger. There's more cows, but really it's that milk production. Like, there's so much more milk produced per cow, and the more milk that a cow produces, the more manure that it generates. So it's actually then starts to like offset in a way, and that's why you see that sort of like no change for a while until those two digesters came online, and okay, now that's the next thing, right? Now we're starting to take that manure, run it through the processing facility, turn part of it into compost, which is easier to move around, to package, to remove from the watershed, market it outside of the watershed, and that's why you see that next decline. Now, if you can imagine going from a 10,000 cow treatment capacity to 40,000, maybe we're going to start to go into a negative balance at that point,
That is
which
incredible.
would be a boon for the lakes.
Yeah, and you just led right into my next question, because I was curious to finish off talking about this chart at the end of, the data here at 2017. So it talks about this digester, and you mentioned that the byproduct, and when the manure is brought in, and at the end of it all, part of it becomes compost. Is that what I understand?
The digestion process is you're not really destroying phosphorus, but you're almost creating different waste streams from the manure that's being fed into the front end of the digester. So you have some a part of it that is liquid in liquid form, and it's the farmers that participate in sending their manure can also use this for their farms. And then you have other sort of streams, so to speak, and one of them being this compost material. So Purple Cow Organics, if you heard of them, they take this and package it, and they can, sell it outside of the watershed to people. So, yeah. Well, great questions. I appreciate your staying power and staying with us for so long, and all the excellent questions. And Teresa, yes, please do reach out to me or to Caitlin as our watershed engagement specialist. She started with us in June. We're lucky to have her. She's great, and she's heading up our volunteer programs. So volunteer days, the lake forecast monitoring, Clean Boats, Clean Waters, which is aquatic invasive species control, like boater education type of program, helping with the science cafes. So she's a busy lady.
Well, I told me that